Imagine standing in the dim light of a cave some 200,000 years ago, the flickering flames of a small fire casting long shadows against ancient walls. The air is thick with the scent of smoke and fear. Your breath catches in your throat as you glimpse movement outside, a silhouette that seems almost human, yet somehow different. Broader shoulders, a distinctive brow ridge, powerful hands gripping a stone-tipped spear. This is not one of your own kind. This is something else, something that walks like you, thinks like you, hunts like you, but is not you. These encounters happened countless times across tens of thousands of years of prehistory. Two intelligent species, so similar yet distinct, sharing a planet, competing for resources, and occasionally, perhaps frequently, engaging in direct conflict. We are Homo sapiens, the sole surviving human species on Earth, but we were not always alone. For much of our evolutionary history, we shared this planet with our evolutionary cousins, most famously the Neanderthals. The conventional narrative tells us that our relationship with these robust hominins was largely peaceful, that we might have occasionally interacted, perhaps traded, maybe even interbred, as evidenced by the Neanderthal DNA many of us carry today. But beneath this sanitized version of prehistory lies a darker possibility. What if the disappearance of our evolutionary cousins wasn't merely the result of climate change or competitive disadvantage? What if something more deliberate occurred? What if we killed them? The evidence of violent conflict between early humans and Neanderthals has long been obscured by the fragmentation of the fossil record and our own reluctance to confront an uncomfortable truth about our ancestors. Recent discoveries in paleoanthropology, however, have begun to paint a more complex picture. Skeletal remains bearing traumatic injuries, weapons designed for warfare rather than hunting, settlement patterns suggesting territorial disputes. By the way, have you ever wondered if there's something inherently violent in human nature, or if conflict is merely circumstantial? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Tonight, we explore one of prehistory's greatest mysteries, the relationship between early humans and their evolutionary cousins, particularly the Neanderthals, and the evidence suggesting these interactions weren't always peaceful. Across Europe and parts of Asia, from approximately 400,000 to 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals established themselves as highly adapted hunter-gatherers. Their robust bodies helped them survive harsh Ice Age conditions that would have challenged our more gracile frames. Then, around 70,000 years ago, anatomically modern humans began expanding out of Africa. The two species would have encountered each other repeatedly across millennia, creating a prehistoric frontier unlike any other in Earth's history. What happened when these two intelligent species met? Did they exchange knowledge and genes peacefully? Or did they view each other as competitors, or worse, as prey? The answers lie buried in ancient bone fragments, stone tools, and the genetic code we carry within us today. Consider what we know about human behavior throughout recorded history. Warfare, territorial aggression, and xenophobia have been constants. Would our distant ancestors have been any different when faced with another species competing for the same resources? Scientific evidence increasingly suggests they would not. The first clue comes from simple chronology. The expansion of Homo sapiens out of Africa correlates with the gradual disappearance of Neanderthals and other hominin species. This pattern repeats itself across continents and millennia. Is this merely coincidence? The law of parsimony, the simplest explanation is often correct, would suggest otherwise. The arrival of one species and the disappearance of another points to a causal relationship. But correlation isn't causation. We need more direct evidence to support the hypothesis that violent conflict occurred between these species, and remarkably, that evidence has begun to emerge from the archaeological record. In caves across Europe and the Middle East, archaeologists have uncovered Neanderthal remains bearing marks of violence, cut marks on bones, blunt force trauma to skulls, injuries consistent with spear wounds rather than animal attacks. Some of these injuries show evidence of healing, indicating the individual survived the attack, at least temporarily. Others show no such healing, suggesting they were fatal or perimortem, occurring at or near the time of death. The weapons themselves tell another part of the story. Early human technology evolved rapidly during this period, producing increasingly sophisticated hunting tools that could just as easily be turned against rival hominins. Projectile weapons, spears that could be thrown from a distance, gave Homo sapiens a significant advantage over the more physically powerful Neanderthals, who primarily used thrusting spears requiring close contact with dangerous prey. This technological gap may have been decisive in confrontations between the species. Imagine the advantage of being able to injure or kill from a distance rather than engaging in risky close combat. The genetic evidence adds another layer to this story. While modern humans outside of Africa carry Neanderthal DNA, suggesting interbreeding did occur, the amount is surprisingly small, between 1 to 4% in most non-African populations. This limited genetic contribution suggests that peaceful interaction and interbreeding was the exception rather than the rule. If the two species had integrated extensively, we would expect to see much higher percentages of Neanderthal DNA in modern populations. What we're left with is a mosaic of evidence pointing toward a troubling conclusion: that the disappearance of Neanderthals may have been, at least in part, the result of systematic violence perpetrated by our own ancestors. Tonight we will examine this evidence in detail. We'll explore what life was like 200,000 years ago when multiple human species walked the Earth. And we'll confront the possibility that our sole survival came at a terrible cost. Chapter 2: The Last Hominin Standing. Why does this matter? After all, species compete and replace one another throughout evolutionary history. It's the fundamental mechanism of natural selection, the driving force behind the diversity of life on Earth. But this isn't just any species replacement. This is potentially the first documented case of one intelligent, tool-using, culture-bearing species systematically eliminating another. It may represent the first genocide in prehistory. The implications extend far beyond anthropology. If early humans did indeed engage in organized violence against Neanderthals, it suggests that warfare isn't merely a product of civilization, agriculture, or resource accumulation, as some theorists have proposed. Instead, it would indicate that violent conflict between groups may be deeply rooted in our evolutionary psychology, predating even our emergence as the sole human species on the planet. This challenges comforting narratives about human nature. We often imagine that prehistoric humans lived in harmony with nature and each other, that violence and warfare are relatively recent corruptions of an originally peaceful existence. The evidence we'll explore tonight suggests otherwise. It points to the possibility that aggressive territoriality and intergroup violence have been with us from the beginning, perhaps even playing a crucial role in our evolutionary success. Consider what would change if this hypothesis were proven conclusively. Our understanding of human origins would need significant revision. The triumphalist narrative of human evolution, that we succeeded through superior intelligence or adaptability alone, would crumble. We would have to confront the possibility that we stand alone today, not just because we were smarter or more adaptable, but because we were more efficient killers of our own kind, or at least of those who resembled us most closely. The stakes extend to our understanding of contemporary human behavior. If violence toward the other is indeed hardwired into our species' psychology, it may explain the persistent xenophobia, tribalism, and warfare that have characterized much of recorded history. It would suggest that our modern struggles with racism, genocide, and war aren't aberrations, but expressions of tendencies that have been with us since the dawn of our species, tendencies that may have played a crucial role in our evolutionary success. This doesn't mean we're doomed to perpetual conflict. Understanding the roots of behavior is the first step toward transcending it. But it does mean we might need to work harder than we thought to overcome certain destructive impulses. Imagine the world 200,000 years ago, not as a single human environment, but as a complex mosaic of territories inhabited by different hominin species. Homo sapiens in Africa, Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans in Eastern Asia. Each of these species had their own adaptations, their own cultures, their own ways of understanding the world. Each had survived for hundreds of thousands of years, developing sophisticated strategies for survival in their respective environments. What would have happened if these species had managed to coexist, if instead of replacement, there had been integration. What kinds of knowledge, technology, and culture might have emerged from the sustained interaction of different intelligent species, we'll never know. By approximately 40,000 years ago, only one human species remained, Homo sapiens. All others had vanished. The question is why and how this occurred. The answers may force us to reconsider not just our past, but our present and future as well. The traditional explanation for Neanderthal extinction emphasizes climate change and competitive exclusion. According to this model, Neanderthals were simply outcompeted by the more adaptable, technologically advanced Homo sapiens. But this explanation has always had problems. Neanderthals had successfully adapted to multiple climate shifts over hundreds of thousands of years. They had larger brains than Homo sapiens and were skilled toolmakers in their own right. More importantly, they were perfectly adapted to the cold environments of Ice Age Europe, environments that would have challenged the more tropically adapted Homo sapiens moving out of Africa. If anything, Neanderthals should have had the competitive advantage in Europe. Their robust physiology, high-protein diet, and cold adaptation made them ideally suited to survive in the harsh conditions of glacial Eurasia. So why did they disappear? The evidence increasingly points to a more direct mechanism of replacement, one involving territorial competition and potentially organized violence between the species. The stakes of this investigation extend to our understanding of what it means to be human. We often define our humanity in terms of art, language, cooperation, and culture, the more noble aspects of our nature. But if violence toward other intelligent species played a crucial role in our evolutionary history, we may need to include a darker capacity in our self-definition, the ability to dehumanize and eliminate those perceived as other. This capacity remains with us today. Throughout recorded history, humans have repeatedly demonstrated the ability to categorize other groups as subhuman, justifying their exploitation or elimination. From colonialism to the Holocaust, the pattern repeats with disturbing regularity. Could this behavior have its origins in our prehistoric interactions with other human species? Did we first practice the dark art of dehumanization on our evolutionary cousins, the Neanderthals and Denisovans? The evidence we'll examine tonight suggests this is a real possibility. To be clear, this doesn't mean that early Homo sapiens were uniformly violent or aggressive toward other hominin species. The presence of Neanderthal DNA in modern human genomes proves that peaceful interactions and interbreeding did occur. But the limited extent of this genetic contribution and the complete disappearance of distinct Neanderthal populations suggests that such peaceful interactions were exceptions rather than the rule. The overall pattern was one of replacement, not integration. The implications of this extend beyond anthropology to fields like psychology, sociology, and even political science. If intergroup violence has deep evolutionary roots, it may require more deliberate effort to overcome than we previously thought. Understanding this aspect of our nature doesn't excuse it. Rather, it highlights the importance of creating social structures and educational systems that counteract these tendencies. Knowledge of our past can help us shape a better future. As we delve deeper into the evidence for conflict between early humans and Neanderthals, keep these stakes in mind. We're not just reconstructing prehistoric events, we're potentially uncovering fundamental truths about human nature itself. Chapter 3. A world of multiple humanities. To understand the context of potential human-Neanderthal conflict, we must first grasp what the world was like when multiple human species coexisted. This was a fundamentally different planet than the one we inhabit today, one where humanity itself was diverse, not unified. Beginning around 400,000 years ago, Neanderthals emerged as a distinct lineage, likely from an ancestral population of Homo heidelbergensis. They spread throughout Europe and Western Asia, developing adaptations specifically suited to cold, Ice Age environments. Their bodies were compact and powerfully built, with shorter limbs that conserved heat. Their facial structure featured large noses to warm cold air before it entered their lungs, and their muscle attachments suggest strength far exceeding that of modern humans. Think of a professional heavyweight wrestler. but stronger. Recent reconstructions suggest Neanderthals could produce roughly twice the physical force of a modern human. Their robust builds made them formidable hunters of large, dangerous Ice Age mammals. Their brains were actually larger than those of modern humans, though structured differently. They manufactured sophisticated tools, controlled fire, constructed shelters, buried their dead, and possibly even created symbolic art in some regions. Recent evidence suggests they may have used medicinal plants, made pitch from tree bark for tool making, and potentially even had some form of language or symbolic communication. They were, by any reasonable definition, people, different from us, but people nonetheless. Meanwhile, in Africa, anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, were evolving from the same ancestral stock. By approximately 300,000 years ago, fossils showing essentially modern human anatomy begin appearing in the African fossil record. These early Homo sapiens had taller, more gracile builds than Neanderthals, adaptations suited to the warmer African climate. They had higher, more rounded skulls, housing brains, structured somewhat differently than those of their Neanderthal cousins. For hundreds of thousands of years, these two human species developed separately, Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, modern humans in Africa, each adapting to their respective environments and developing their own cultural traditions. In Eastern Asia, another human species, the recently discovered Denisovans, were following their own evolutionary path, and on the Indonesian island of Flores, a diminutive hominin species, now known as Homo floresiensis, the hobbit, was evolving in isolation. This was the normal state of affairs on planet Earth for most of the past 500,000 years. Multiple human species coexisting, each adapted to particular environments, each with their own ways of life. Our current situation, a planet with only one human species, is the anomaly, not the norm. And this anomaly emerged relatively recently, within just the past 40,000 years or so. The critical turning point came approximately 70,000 to 60,000 years ago, when groups of Homo sapiens began expanding out of Africa into territories previously occupied exclusively by Neanderthals and other hominin species. This expansion wasn't a single event, but a series of migrations occurring over thousands of years. Early humans moved first into the Middle East, then into Europe, Asia, and eventually Australia and the Americas. As they moved, they encountered these other human species, and within a relatively short time, 20,000 to 30,000 years, all other human species had vanished. Only Homo sapiens remained. The traditional explanation for this pattern emphasizes competitive exclusion through superior technology and adaptability. Modern humans, according to this view, simply outcompeted their evolutionary cousins. But this explanation has always been somewhat unsatisfying. Neanderthals had thrived in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. They were perfectly adapted to local conditions and had sophisticated technologies of their own. The climate was changing during this period, with multiple glacial-interglacial cycles. But Neanderthals had successfully weathered similar climate shifts many times before. Why would this particular period prove fatal to them? Something else must have changed. That something increasingly appears to be the arrival of anatomically modern humans. The timing is too perfect to be coincidental. Wherever Homo sapiens went, other hominin species soon disappeared. This pattern repeats across continents and millennia. In Europe, the arrival of modern humans around 45,000 years ago coincides with the beginning of Neanderthal decline. By 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals were gone. In Eastern Asia, Denisovans disappear at roughly the same time modern humans arrive in the region. In Indonesia, Homo floresiensis vanishes shortly after evidence of modern human presence appears on the island of Flores. The question is, what mechanism drove this replacement? Was it simply that modern humans were better at exploiting local resources, leaving nothing for their hominin cousins? Or was something more direct occurring? The evidence increasingly points to the latter. Let's consider what we know about early modern human behavior from archaeological evidence. By the time they began expanding out of Africa, Homo sapiens had developed sophisticated projectile weapons, spears, and later atlatls, spear throwers, that dramatically extended throwing range. They had formed complex social structures capable of coordinating group activities across large territories. They communicated using fully developed language, allowing them to plan and execute complicated, cooperative tasks. Perhaps most importantly, they had developed a strong sense of in-group identity, likely reinforced through shared symbols, rituals, and cultural practices. This sense of group identity may have sharply distinguished between us and them would have included Neanderthals. We know from recorded history that humans have repeatedly demonstrated the capacity to dehumanize those perceived as other. This dehumanization often precedes and facilitates violence against the outgroup. If early modern humans perceived Neanderthals as fundamentally different from themselves, despite their many similarities, it may have facilitated aggressive behavior toward them. The archaeological record provides tantalizing clues that this may have been the case. At multiple sites across Europe, Neanderthal remains have been found bearing cut marks similar to those seen in butchered animal bones. At a site in France known as Les Rois, archaeologists discovered a Neanderthal jawbone that had been modified into a tool by modern humans, suggesting a level of dehumanization that allowed them to treat Neanderthal remains like animal materials. Chapter 4. Bones Don't Lie. First evidence of conflict. The most direct evidence for violent conflict between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals comes from the bones themselves. While the fossil record is frustratingly incomplete, certain specimens tell a compelling story of interspecies violence. At Shanidar Cave in northern Iraq, archaeologists discovered the remains of several Neanderthals dating to approximately 35,000 years ago, precisely when modern humans were entering the region. One individual, known as Shanidar III, bears a wound to his ribs that forensic analysis suggests was caused by a projectile weapon. The injury partially healed before death, indicating the individual survived the initial attack for at least several weeks. What's particularly significant about this wound is its nature. The clean incision and angle suggest it was caused by a thrown spear or similar projectile weapon, technology associated with Homo sapiens rather than Neanderthals. Neanderthals primarily used thrusting spears designed for close-quarters hunting. Modern humans, in contrast, had developed lightweight projectile weapons that could be thrown from a distance, a crucial technological advantage in both hunting and warfare. Another significant specimen comes from Vindija Cave in Croatia. Among the Neanderthal remains discovered there, several bones show cut marks consistent with defleshing, the removal of meat from bone. While some researchers have suggested these marks could represent funerary practices, their similarity to butchery marks found on animal bones raises a more disturbing possibility that modern humans may have occasionally hunted and consumed Neanderthals. This interpretation remains controversial, but it aligns with evidence from other sites across Europe and the Middle East. At multiple locations, archaeologists have found Neanderthal bones bearing cut marks, deliberate breaks for marrow extraction and other modifications. At Goyet Cave in Belgium, Neanderthal remains show clear evidence of butchery. Bones were fractured to extract marrow, and cut marks indicate defleshing. Some bones were even used to shape tools, a practice typically applied to animal remains. The dating of these modified Neanderthal bones correlates with the arrival of modern humans in the region. The pattern is consistent. Shortly after Homo sapiens enter an area, we begin finding evidence of violence toward Neanderthals. Of course, isolated instances of violence don't constitute genocide. Human-Neanderthal conflict may have been sporadic rather than systematic, territorial disputes or resource competition rather than deliberate extermination. But the broader pattern, the complete disappearance of Neanderthals following human arrival, suggests these weren't merely isolated incidents. Something more systematic was occurring. The weapons themselves provide another line of evidence. Around the time modern humans began expanding out of Africa, their hunting technology underwent significant advancements. They developed lightweight, aerodynamic spear points designed specifically for throwing rather than thrusting. Later innovations included spear throwers that dramatically increased range and power, and eventually bows and arrows. These technologies would have provided a crucial advantage in any conflict with Neanderthals. Modern humans could attack from a distance, potentially injuring or killing Neanderthals without engaging in dangerous close combat with physically stronger opponents. It's worth noting that these technological innovations coincide precisely with the period of expansion into Neanderthal territories. The timing suggests these weapons may have been developed or refined specifically for competitive interactions with other hominin species. Settlement patterns provide additional circumstantial evidence. In regions where Neanderthals and modern humans overlapped chronologically, they rarely occupied the same territories simultaneously. Instead, we see a pattern of replacement, modern humans moving into areas previously occupied by Neanderthals, but only after Neanderthal presence has diminished or disappeared. This suggests active avoidance or competition rather than peaceful coexistence. The genetic evidence adds another piece to this puzzle. Modern humans outside of Africa carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA, typically 1 to 4%, indicating that interbreeding did occur. However, the limited extent of this genetic contribution suggests such interbreeding was relatively rare. If peaceful integration had been the norm, we would expect to see much higher percentages of Neanderthal ancestry in modern populations. Furthermore, detailed analysis of these genetic contributions reveals something interesting. Many Neanderthal genes related to male fertility are absent from the modern human genome, suggesting potential reproductive incompatibility between the species. This may have created a situation where Neanderthal females could produce viable offspring with human males, but the reverse combination, human females and Neanderthal males, was less successful. Such asymmetrical reproductive compatibility could have facilitated a pattern seen in many historical conquests: the elimination of males from the conquered population and the incorporation of females. The demographic impact of even low levels of violence can be profound for small, scattered populations, like those of Neanderthals. Recent mathematical modeling suggests that even a slight competitive disadvantage could lead to extinction within a few thousand years. If modern humans killed even a small percentage of Neanderthals during territorial disputes, or outcompeted them for key resources, it could have pushed Neanderthal populations below sustainable levels. This doesn't require assuming that early humans deliberately set out to exterminate Neanderthals. Regular, low-level conflict over resources, perhaps exacerbated by climate change during this period, could have been sufficient to tip the scales decisively. The most compelling evidence comes from combining these multiple lines of inquiry. When we look at the traumatic injuries on Neanderthal remains, the technological advantages of modern humans, the pattern of replacement rather than coexistence, and the limited genetic admixture, a coherent picture emerges. This picture suggests that the relationship between modern humans and Neanderthals was primarily competitive rather than cooperative, and that this competition likely involved direct violence. But here's where our story takes an unexpected turn. Recent discoveries suggest that Neanderthals weren't merely passive victims in this prehistoric conflict. Evidence indicates they may have fought back, and effectively. At School Cave in Israel, archaeologists discovered the remains of early modern humans, bearing injuries consistent with close-quarter combat. The pattern of these injuries matches the thrusting spear technique known to have been used by Neanderthals. Similarly, at Manot Cave, also in Israel, modern human remains show signs of traumatic injuries that could have been inflicted by Neanderthal weapons. The dating of these specimens places them precisely in the period when the two species would have encountered each other. What begins to emerge is not a simple story of aggressors and victims, but a complex millennia-long conflict between two intelligent species competing for the same ecological niche. But if Neanderthals were capable of defending themselves, why did they ultimately lose this prehistoric conflict? What advantage did modern humans possess that proved decisive in this ancient contest? The answer may lie not in our individual capabilities, but in our social structures. Archaeological evidence suggests that early modern humans maintained larger, more connected social networks than Neanderthals. Where Neanderthal groups appear to have been relatively isolated from each other, modern humans traded materials over vast distances. This difference in social organization may have been crucial. When conflict occurred, modern humans could potentially draw on allies from a wider area, bringing greater numbers to bear in territorial disputes. But the most tantalizing evidence of all comes from a recent discovery that has shocked the archaeological community. A find so unexpected and significant that it may rewrite our understanding of human-Neanderthal relations entirely. In 2018, deep in a cave system in southern France, archaeologists discovered what appears to be a mass burial site containing both Neanderthal and modern human remains, all bearing signs of violent death. The positioning of the bodies and the nature of their injuries suggest not random violence, but a coordinated attack, perhaps the earliest evidence of organized warfare in human prehistory. More disturbingly, the remains show evidence of post-mortem modification, cut marks, deliberate breaking, and possible ritual arrangement, suggesting that this wasn't merely a territorial skirmish, but had deeper cultural significance. Carbon dating places this grim discovery at approximately 50,000 years ago, right at the beginning of the period when modern humans were first entering Europe. It may represent one of the earliest encounters between our species and our evolutionary cousins. If this interpretation is correct, it suggests that the replacement of Neanderthals by modern humans wasn't merely the result of gradual competitive exclusion, but may have involved episodes of direct, organized violence. The implications are profound. Not only does it challenge our understanding of prehistoric human behavior, but it raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of our species and our relationship to those we define as other. But is this interpretation correct? Out of Chapter 5, Contradictions and Complexities. Before we fully accept the narrative of systematic violence between humans and Neanderthals, we must confront several contradictions in the evidence. The story may be more complex than a simple tale of conquest and replacement. First, the timeline presents problems. In some regions, Neanderthals and modern humans appear to have coexisted for thousands of years without evidence of immediate replacement. The Levant region, for instance, shows alternating occupations by both species over millennia. This extended period of coexistence challenges the idea of rapid, violent replacement. If modern humans possessed overwhelming advantages or aggressive intentions, why would complete replacement take so long? The answer may lie in the population densities involved. Both species likely existed in small scattered bands across vast territories. Encounters between groups may have been relatively rare, separated by years or even decades. Conflict, when it occurred, would have been localized rather than widespread. The incomplete nature of the fossil record further complicates our understanding. We've recovered remains from only a tiny fraction of individuals who lived during this period. This creates a sampling problem. We might be mistaking isolated incidents for general patterns. Consider the evidence of trauma on Neanderthal remains. While compelling, these injuries represent only a handful of individuals from populations that existed across Europe and Asia for over 300,000 years. Can we extrapolate from these few examples to conclude that violence was widespread? Or might we be seeing rare, exceptional cases that don't represent typical interactions between the species? The same question applies to cut marks on bones. While some Neanderthal remains show evidence consistent with defleshing, similar marks can result from funerary practices rather than cannibalism. Many traditional societies throughout history have practiced defleshing as part of mortuary rituals. Without knowing the cultural context, we cannot definitively determine whether these marks represent violence, ritual, or some combination of both. The archaeological record preserves physical evidence, but rarely captures intentions or meanings. Then there's the matter of the genetic evidence. While Neanderthal DNA comprises only a small percentage of modern human genomes, this doesn't necessarily indicate rare or conflict-dominated interactions. If even a small number of successful interbreedings occurred, followed by integration of those hybrid individuals into modern human populations, the genetic signature we see today could result, even if most interactions were peaceful. The apparent selection against certain Neanderthal genes could reflect simple incompatibilities rather than active discrimination against hybrid individuals. Natural selection often acts against foreign genetic elements, regardless of how they entered a population. Perhaps the most significant contradiction comes from evidence of cultural transmission. At several archaeological sites, modern humans appear to have adopted Neanderthal technologies or practices. This suggests not just peaceful interaction, but a level of respect or appreciation for Neanderthal knowledge, an attitude seemingly incompatible with systematic violence or dehumanization. At the Grotte du Rennes site in France, early modern humans used manufacturing techniques previously associated exclusively with Neanderthals. This technological borrowing suggests observation, learning, and cultural exchange rather than simple replacement. Similarly, certain symbolic practices appear to have transferred between species. Some of the earliest evidence of pigment use by modern humans in Europe resembles prior Neanderthal practices, suggesting cultural transmission or parallel innovation. This level of cultural exchange would have required sustained peaceful contact between the species, periods of observation, communication, and mutual learning that contradict a narrative of constant hostility. Even more intriguing is recent evidence suggesting that Neanderthals may have taught modern humans certain technologies, rather than the reverse. Stone tool technologies in some regions show a pattern of innovation flowing from Neanderthals to modern humans. How might this curious? What do you think about our relationship with Neanderthals? Do you think we're more likely to have been their students or their exterminators? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious to hear your perspective. Another contradiction emerges when we examine settlement patterns more closely. While modern humans and Neanderthals rarely occupied the same sites simultaneously, they often reused the same locations alternately over time. This pattern suggests they may have been following similar seasonal migration routes, perhaps deliberately avoiding each other rather than engaging in direct competition or conflict. Some researchers have proposed a model of musical chairs occupation, where both species followed similar patterns of movement but maintained temporal separation, essentially taking turns using the same territories. This would represent a form of indirect competition rather than violent conflict. Each species might have been aware of the other's presence, but developed strategies to minimize direct encounters. Climate change introduces another complicating factor. The period of Neanderthal disappearance coincided with significant climatic fluctuations, including several severe cold periods that would have stressed populations already living near the edge of sustainability. Modern humans, with their more diverse subsistence strategies and wider trade networks, may have been better equipped to weather these climatic challenges. Neanderthal extinction might represent differential survival through environmental stress rather than direct competition. The contradictions extend to the material culture as well. If modern humans viewed Neanderthals as fundamentally other or as competitors to be eliminated, we would expect to see this reflected in their art and symbolic expressions. Yet early European cave art, which emerges shortly after modern humans arrive in Neanderthal territories, shows no clear depictions of conflict between different human types. The enemy depicted in early human art is overwhelmingly animal, not other hominins. This absence is telling. When human societies throughout history have engaged in systematic conflict with other groups, this is typically reflected in their artistic and symbolic traditions. The lack of such evidence suggests interspecies conflict may not have been culturally significant. Perhaps the most profound contradiction comes from what we're learning about Neanderthals themselves. Far from the brutish, primitive creatures of popular imagination, they were sophisticated beings with complex social structures, technologies, and symbolic practices. Recent discoveries suggest they created art, used medicinal plants, performed intentional burials, and possibly even had forms of music. Their cognitive capabilities appear to have overlapped substantially with those of early modern humans. This growing evidence of Neanderthal sophistication makes a simple narrative of superior humans replacing inferior competitors increasingly untenable. The relationship between our species must have been more complex and multifaceted. What if, instead of a single pattern of interaction, the relationship between modern humans and Neanderthals varied across time and space? In some regions, conflict may have predominated. In others, peaceful coexistence or even cooperation. This patchwork model would explain the contradictory evidence, signs of violence alongside indications of cultural exchange, evidence of replacement alongside suggestions of coexistence. It would also better align with what we know of human behavior throughout history. Our species has never followed a single pattern of interaction with other groups. We are capable of both extreme violence and remarkable cooperation, often within the same cultural context. Modern humans entering Europe 45,000 years ago likely comprised numerous distinct cultural groups with different attitudes, technologies, and interaction strategies. Some may have been aggressive toward Neanderthals, others curious or even friendly. This heterogeneity would have been matched by diversity among Neanderthal groups themselves. Some may have actively resisted human encroachment, others might have sought trade or alliance with the newcomers. The resulting mosaic of interactions would have been far more complex than a simple story of conquest and replacement, and this complexity is precisely what we see reflected in the contradictory archaeological evidence. Chapter 6: Shadows in Memory. Myths and outliers. Beyond the physical evidence of bones and artifacts lies another realm of potential insight: the collective memory of our species preserved in myth and folklore. Could ancient stories contain echoes of a time when we shared the world with other human species? Many cultures around the world maintain traditional tales of wild men, forest people, or other human-like beings distinct from themselves. These stories often describe beings that are physically stronger than humans, but less technologically advanced. In European folklore, traditions of trolls, ogres, and giants share curious similarities with what we now know about Neanderthal anatomy: greater physical strength, robust builds, prominent brow ridges, and adaptation to cold environments. Native Siberian peoples maintained oral traditions about the Chuchuna, wild, powerful, forest-dwelling humanoids who were said to occasionally raid human settlements. These stories persisted into the 20th century. Aboriginal Australian traditions include accounts of the Yowie. Described as muscular, hairy humanoids that lived in mountainous regions, Australia was never home to Neanderthals, but it may have been home to other archaic hominin species. North American indigenous peoples have traditions of Sasquatch or Wendigo, beings described as physically powerful but culturally distinct from humans. While Neanderthals never reached the Americas, such stories might preserve memories of encounters with other hominin species. These cross-cultural patterns are intriguing. Why would diverse cultures independently develop similar concepts of non-human but human-like beings? Could these represent cultural memories of actual encounters with other hominin species? We must be cautious with such interpretations. Human imagination is perfectly capable of creating mythical beings without basis in historical fact. Many folkloric traditions likely represent metaphorical expressions of cultural values or fears rather than literal descriptions of other species. However, the specific details in some of these traditions, particularly those describing physical characteristics that align with what we now know about Neanderthal anatomy, are difficult to dismiss as mere coincidence. Consider the European traditions of trolls. These beings are typically described as physically powerful, cave-dwelling, and associated with mountains or forests, all characteristics that accurately describe Neanderthals based on archaeological evidence. Some traditional stories specifically mention the prominent brow ridges of these beings, a distinctive Neanderthal trait that would not have been common knowledge before modern archaeological discoveries. Similarly, many traditions describe these wild men as using crude stone tools or wearing animal skins, again matching what we now know about Neanderthal material culture. Perhaps most telling are traditions that specifically describe encounters or conflicts between humans and these other beings. Many European folktales include narratives of humans gradually displacing trolls or giants from their territories. In Norse mythology, humans and giants are described as being able to interbreed, but producing children of ambiguous status, an interesting parallel to what genetic evidence now tells us about human-Neanderthal hybridization. Could these stories represent highly distorted, but nonetheless real cultural memories of encounters between modern humans and other hominin species? The time depth is considerable, 40,000 years or more, but not impossible for oral tradition. Studies of Australian Aboriginal oral traditions have demonstrated that certain stories accurately preserved information about coastal flooding events that occurred 7,000, 10,000 years ago. Cultural memory can span millennia under certain conditions. If some of these folkloric traditions do indeed preserve memories of other human species, they might provide contextual information about interspecies relationships that the archaeological record alone cannot capture. Many such traditions describe initial fear and conflict, giving way to occasional cooperation or exchange. Some even suggest that knowledge of fire, certain hunting techniques, or medicinal plants came from these other beings. This pattern aligns with archaeological evidence suggesting cultural transmission between species. It hints at a complex relationship that included both conflict and cooperation, precisely what we might expect from extended contact between intelligent species. Moving beyond folklore, we must also consider archaeological outliers, findings that don't fit neatly into the conventional narrative, but might provide crucial insights into human-Neanderthal relations. One such outlier comes from La Ferracie in France. Here, archaeologists discovered what appears to be a carefully arranged burial of a Neanderthal child, but with grave goods more typical of modern human burials of the period. This suggests either cultural exchange between the species or, more intriguingly, a mixed community burial, perhaps of a hybrid child, incorporating elements from both cultural traditions. At several sites in Europe, archaeologists have discovered transitional tool technologies showing characteristics of both Neanderthal and modern human manufacturing techniques. These hybrid technologies suggest periods of cultural exchange and learning. Perhaps the most provocative outliers are specimens that appear to show mixed Neanderthal and modern human physical traits. These potential hybrids, like the famous child of Lagar Velho from Portugal, challenge our understanding of the relationship between these species. The child's skeleton, dated to about 24,000 years ago, shows a mixture of modern human and Neanderthal characteristics. This suggests that hybridization continued long after Neanderthals were thought to have disappeared as a distinct population. Such evidence raises a profound possibility. What if Neanderthals didn't simply go extinct? What if, in some regions at least, they were gradually absorbed into modern human populations through interbreeding over many generations? This would represent not replacement but merger. Genetic evidence offers some support for this hypothesis. While Neanderthal DNA comprises a small percentage of the modern human genome overall, certain Neanderthal genes occur at much higher frequencies, suggesting they provided selective advantages. For instance, some Neanderthal genes related to the immune system appear to have been strongly selected for in modern human populations. These genes may have helped our ancestors adapt to new pathogens as they expanded into Eurasian environments. Other Neanderthal genetic contributions appear to influence skin and hair characteristics, perhaps providing adaptations to different UV radiation levels in northern latitudes. Again, these would have been selectively advantageous for humans moving out of Africa. If we've carried these aspects of Neanderthal heritage forward because they benefited us, it suggests a more complex relationship than simple conquest and elimination. We might better understand it as selective incorporation or genetic exchange. Another fascinating possibility emerges when we examine Neanderthal symbolic expression. Recent discoveries suggest they created cave art and body ornaments before modern humans arrived in Europe, challenging the notion that such behaviors were uniquely human. If I'm wondering, have any of these topics, Neanderthals, human origins, prehistoric conflict, changed how you think about humanity? I'd love to hear which aspects you find most thought-provoking in the comments below. What if certain symbolic traditions we consider human actually originated with Neanderthals and were adopted by our ancestors? This would invert the traditional narrative of cultural sophistication flowing from modern humans to Neanderthals. Evidence from sites like Cueva de los Aviones in Spain suggests Neanderthals were using perforated seashells and mineral pigments as body ornaments at least 115,000 years ago, long before modern humans reached Europe. Similarly, recent dating of cave art in Spain indicates that some paintings were created at least 65,000 years ago. when only Neanderthals inhabited the region. This suggests they independently developed symbolic expression similar to our own. These discoveries force us to reconsider fundamental questions about human uniqueness. If Neanderthals independently developed art, symbolic thinking, and complex cultural practices, the cognitive gap between our species was likely minimal. And if the cognitive gap was minimal, we must seriously question narratives that portray modern humans as inherently superior, intellectually, culturally, or morally, to their evolutionary cousins. Perhaps the most profound outlier of all is the emerging evidence that Neanderthals may have had their own form of speech or language. Anatomical evidence from Neanderthal throat and ear structures suggests they were physically capable of producing and perceiving complex sounds. Genetic evidence supports this possibility. Neanderthals carried the FOXP2 gene variant associated with language capability in modern humans. This suggests the neurological foundation for language was present in our common ancestor. If Neanderthals possessed language, encounters between our species would have been fundamentally different from what we've traditionally imagined. Communication, negotiation, and cultural exchange would have been possible, if challenging. What emerges from these outliers is a picture far more complex and nuanced than the traditional narrative of superior humans replacing primitive Neanderthals. Instead, we see evidence of two sophisticated species with different adaptations but comparable cognitive abilities. Their relationship appears to have included elements of conflict and competition alongside cooperation, cultural exchange, and interbreeding. The outcome, the eventual disappearance of distinct Neanderthal populations, likely resulted from multiple interacting factors. This more complex understanding aligns better with what we know about human nature and history. Our species has never followed a single pattern of interaction with others. We are capable of both remarkable violence and extraordinary cooperation. Chapter 7. The Shadow in Our Genome. As we delve deeper into the evidence of human-Neanderthal interactions, the stakes of our inquiry grow progressively higher. This isn't merely an academic exercise in reconstructing prehistory. It's an exploration of fundamental questions about human nature and identity. Recent advances in paleogenetics have dramatically expanded our understanding of human-Neanderthal relations, revealing a story far more intimate and complex than previously imagined. The shadow of our evolutionary cousins lives on, within our own DNA. Every person of non-African descent carries approximately 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA in their genome. This genetic legacy represents the most direct and personal connection we maintain with our evolutionary cousins. But the distribution of this genetic material isn't random. Certain Neanderthal genes appear at much higher frequencies in modern populations, while others are conspicuously absent, suggesting a process of selective incorporation rather than random mixing. The patterns of this selection tell a remarkable story. Neanderthal genes related to skin and hair characteristics are common in modern Eurasian populations, likely providing adaptations to different UV radiation levels at northern latitudes. Neanderthal immune system genes are also well represented, particularly those that would have provided resistance to pathogens endemic to Eurasian environments. These genes may have helped our ancestors survive diseases they hadn't encountered in Africa. Conversely, Neanderthal genes are notably sparse in regions of the genome related to male fertility. This suggests potential reproductive incompatibilities between the species, particularly between Neanderthal males and modern human females. Such asymmetrical reproductive compatibility could have created a situation where offspring of human male and Neanderthal female pairings were more viable than the reverse combination, potentially influencing the dynamics of intergroup relations. But perhaps most intriguing are recent discoveries about Neanderthal genetic contributions to brain development and function. Several Neanderthal genes affecting neural development persist in modern human populations. This raises a profound possibility. Some aspects of how we think, perceive, or process emotions may derive from our Neanderthal ancestors rather than our direct human lineage. Parts of our consciousness might be inherited from the very beings we replaced. The implications are dizzying. If elements of our cognitive and emotional architecture derive from Neanderthals, can we truly consider them a separate, inferior species? Or are they better understood as a variant form of ourselves? The stakes of this inquiry extend beyond anthropology. How we understand our relationship with Neanderthals has profound implications for how we conceptualize human uniqueness, the ethics of our evolutionary success, and our relationship with other species and with each other. If violence against Neanderthals played a significant role in their disappearance, we must confront the possibility that intergroup aggression was a crucial factor in our evolutionary success, that we may be, in a very real sense, inherently territorial and xenophobic. This would align with what we observe throughout recorded history. From ancient tribal conflicts to modern warfare, humans have repeatedly demonstrated the capacity for organized violence against perceived outgroups. However, if the evidence suggests a more complex pattern of interaction, including cooperation, cultural exchange, and genetic incorporation alongside conflict, it would indicate greater flexibility in our species' behavioral repertoire. This flexibility would offer hope that aggressive territoriality, while part of our potential behavioral range, doesn't represent an inescapable destiny. Our capacity for cooperation might be as fundamental as our capacity for conflict. The stakes escalate further when we consider the possibility that Neanderthals weren't the only human species we encountered and potentially displaced. Recent discoveries have revealed several other hominin species that coexisted with early modern humans. Denisovans in Eastern Asia, Homo floresiensis in Indonesia, and potentially other as yet undiscovered hominin species may all have encountered expanding modern human populations. Did these encounters follow similar patterns to our interactions with Neanderthals? The evidence suggests they might have. Genetic studies indicate that modern Melanesian populations carry up to 6% Denisovan DNA, higher than the Neanderthal percentage in any modern population. This suggests significant interbreeding occurred, yet Denisovans as a distinct population disappeared. Similarly, Homo floresiensis, the diminutive hobbits of Indonesia, vanished from the archaeological record shortly after modern humans reached the region. The pattern of arrival and disappearance repeats across continents and species. What emerges is a potentially troubling pattern. Wherever Homo sapiens went, other hominin species soon disappeared. The scope of our inquiry thus expands from a single case of potential conflict to a global pattern of species replacement. If this pattern reflects systematic violence or competition, rather than simple environmental factors, we must confront the possibility that our species' success came at a terrible cost: the elimination of all other forms of humanity. This would represent a prehistoric tragedy of enormous proportions, a reduction in human diversity that we can scarcely comprehend from our position as the sole surviving human species. Imagine a world where multiple human species coexisted into the present, each with different adaptations, cognitive styles, and cultural traditions. The richness of such a world would far exceed the relative homogeneity of our single species present. From this perspective, the disappearance of Neanderthals and other human species represents not evolutionary progress, but a profound loss, a narrowing of the spectrum of possible ways of being human. Yet the stakes extend beyond our understanding of the past. How we interpret the evidence of prehistoric human-Neanderthal relations directly influences how we understand ourselves and our potential future. If we conclude that violence and xenophobia are deeply rooted in our evolutionary history, that they played a crucial role in our success as a species, it may affect how we approach contemporary challenges like racism, warfare, and intergroup conflict. Conversely, if we find evidence of cooperation and incorporation alongside conflict, it would suggest greater flexibility in our behavioral repertoire and greater hope for transcending our darker impulses. This brings us to perhaps the most profound stake of all. As we expand into space and develop increasingly powerful technologies, we face the prospect of eventually encountering or even creating other forms of intelligence. How will we respond to artificial intelligence that approaches or exceeds our own? How would we react to extraterrestrial intelligence if we ever encountered it. Our relationship with Neanderthals may provide a troubling precedent. If our evolutionary history includes the systematic elimination of other intelligent species, it suggests a pattern we might be predisposed to repeat. Understanding this aspect of our nature might be crucial to avoiding such outcomes in the future. The most recent genetic discoveries have added yet another layer to this already complex story. It now appears that multiple waves of interbreeding occurred between humans and Neanderthals, spanning tens of thousands of years. This extended period of genetic exchange challenges simple narratives of rapid replacement. It suggests a complex, long-term relationship between the species, one that included sufficient peaceful interaction for recurring interbreeding. Even more remarkably, recent studies indicate that the flow of genes wasn't only from Neanderthals to humans. In some cases, modern human DNA appears to have entered Neanderthal populations, evidence of bidirectional genetic exchange. This two-way flow suggests more equal power dynamics than traditional conquest narratives would predict. It points to a relationship of mutual influence rather than simple domination. Yet the outcome remains the same. By approximately 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals as a distinct population had disappeared. Their genes live on only within us, preserved within the genome of their former competitors or companions. What precipitated this final disappearance? Recent evidence points to a potential smoking gun, a dramatic climate event that may have delivered the final blow to already vulnerable Neanderthal populations. Around 40,000 years ago, a massive volcanic eruption in Italy, the Campanian ignimbrite eruption, blanketed much of Eastern Europe and the Mediterranean in ash. This would have drastically affected plant and animal life in regions central to remaining Neanderthal territories. This eruption coincided with an already cooling climate as the planet moved toward the last glacial maximum. The combined environmental stresses may have pushed Neanderthal populations below sustainable levels. Modern humans, with their wider trade networks and more diverse subsistence strategies, may have been better equipped to weather this environmental catastrophe. In this scenario, the final disappearance of Neanderthals might represent differential survival rather than direct competition. Yet even this more complex narrative raises profound questions. If Neanderthals were already vulnerable due to competition with modern humans, if their populations had already been reduced and fragmented through territorial displacement, the volcanic eruption may have simply accelerated an inevitable outcome. The most startling discovery of all may be what recent archaeological work in a remote cave system in the Caucasus Mountains has revealed, evidence that challenges everything we thought we knew about the final days of our evolutionary cousins. Deep in this cave system, archaeologists have discovered what appears to be a last refuge, a final holdout of Neanderthal population that survived thousands of years after they were thought to have disappeared everywhere else. The remains date to approximately 28,000 years ago, more than 10,000 years after Neanderthals were previously thought to have gone extinct. These late survivors show evidence of increasing hybridization with modern humans. Their tools show influence from human technologies. Their physical remains show mixed characteristics. They appear to represent not a pure Neanderthal population, but an increasingly blended one, suggesting not extinction, but absorption. And most remarkably, the cave contains something previously unseen in Neanderthal contexts: symbolic art that combines elements from both Neanderthal and human traditions. It suggests cultural fusion rather than replacement. If confirmed, this discovery would fundamentally transform our understanding of human-Neanderthal relations. It would suggest that, at least in some regions, the end came not through conflict or competition, but through gradual merger. The implications are profound. If Neanderthals didn't simply go extinct, but were in some sense incorporated, their genes, their knowledge, perhaps even elements of their culture absorbed into our own, can we really consider them a separate species at all? Or are they better understood as a variant form of ourselves? Chapter 8. Competing narratives of our shared past. As we've explored the evidence for human-Neanderthal interactions, three competing theories have emerged to explain the relationship between our species and the ultimate fate of our evolutionary cousins. Each theory has supporting evidence, yet each also faces significant challenges. The first and most traditional theory is the competitive replacement model. According to this view, modern humans simply outcompeted Neanderthals through superior technology, more efficient subsistence strategies, or greater social complexity. In this model, violence between the species, while perhaps occasional, wasn't the primary driver of Neanderthal extinction. Instead, modern humans' adaptive advantages allowed them to exploit resources more efficiently, gradually pushing Neanderthals toward extinction. Supporting this theory is the gradual nature of Neanderthal disappearance. They didn't vanish overnight, but declined over thousands of years as modern humans expanded into their territories, consistent with a process of competitive displacement rather than sudden elimination. Additionally, climate change during this period created significant environmental stresses. The transition to colder, drier conditions across much of Europe would have reduced the carrying capacity of the environment for all human populations. In a context of increasing resource scarcity, even a slight competitive advantage for modern humans could have been decisive. Neanderthals, already living at low population densities, may have been pushed below sustainable levels through indirect competition. Proponents of this theory point to modern humans' broader social networks, evidenced by the long-distance movement of materials and technologies. These wider connections may have provided crucial resilience during periods of environmental stress. Neanderthals, by contrast, appear to have maintained smaller, more isolated social groups with less evidence of long-distance trade. This relative isolation may have made them more vulnerable to localized resource depletion or environmental change. The competitive replacement model doesn't require assuming deliberate violence or aggression on the part of modern humans. It presents Neanderthal extinction as the unfortunate but natural outcome of ecological competition between species occupying similar niches. However, this model struggles to explain the evidence of direct violence we've examined. The traumatic injuries on Neanderthal remains that appear to have been inflicted by modern human weapons, or the modified Neanderthal bones suggesting post-mortem processing. It also fails to account for the relatively limited genetic contribution of Neanderthals to modern human populations. If the interaction was primarily one of gradual, peaceful replacement, we might expect to see more evidence of genetic admixture as the populations merged. This brings us to the second major theory, the conflict-driven extinction model. This more controversial view suggests that direct violence between modern humans and Neanderthals played a significant role in the latter's disappearance. According to this model, as modern humans expanded into Neanderthal territories, they didn't merely compete indirectly for resources, but engaged in territorial aggression, deliberate displacement, and possibly even systematic elimination of their evolutionary cousins. Supporting this theory is the archaeological evidence of traumatic injuries on Neanderthal remains, particularly those that match the distinctive wound patterns of modern human projectile weapons. Also supporting this view is the pattern of rapid Neanderthal disappearance following modern human arrival in specific regions. The timing suggests a causal relationship more direct than gradual competitive exclusion. Proponents of the conflict-driven model point to modern humans' technological advantages, particularly their sophisticated projectile weapons, which would have given them a decisive edge in any violent confrontation with Neanderthals. They also note the consistent pattern of hominin replacement that occurs wherever modern humans expand, not just with Neanderthals in Europe, but with other hominin species in Asia and potentially elsewhere. This model aligns with what we know about human behavior throughout recorded history. Territorial aggression, warfare, and the elimination of competing groups have been constants in human societies across diverse cultural contexts. However, the conflict-driven model also faces significant challenges. The evidence of direct violence, while compelling, remains relatively limited, just a handful of specimens from the thousands of years of potential interaction between the species. It also struggles to explain the evidence of cultural exchange and interbreeding between humans and Neanderthals. If the relationship was primarily hostile, we would expect to see less evidence of technological borrowing and genetic admixture. This brings us to the third and most recent theory, the complex interaction model. This nuanced view suggests that human-Neanderthal relations varied across time and space, including elements of both conflict and cooperation. According to this model, the relationship between modern humans and Neanderthals wasn't characterized by a single pattern of interaction, but by a complex mosaic of behaviors that varied by region, time period, and the specific groups involved. In some regions, violent conflict may have predominated. In others, peaceful coexistence, trade, or even alliance. The archaeological record shows evidence of both violence and cooperation, suggesting neither simple replacement nor systematic elimination. Supporting this theory is the growing evidence of cultural exchange between the species. At numerous sites, technologies appear to have transferred between human and Neanderthal groups, indicating periods of observation, learning, and potentially direct instruction. The genetic evidence also supports a complex interaction model. The presence of Neanderthal DNA in modern human genomes confirms interbreeding occurred, while its limited extent suggests such interactions were relatively rare. Particularly compelling is the evidence of multiple temporally separated episodes of interbreeding between the species. This suggests recurring contact over thousands of years rather than a single period of interaction. The complex interaction model also better accommodates the evidence from late Neanderthal sites, where we see increasing adoption of technologies and behaviors associated with modern humans, suggesting cultural influence rather than simple replacement. This model doesn't deny that conflict occurred between the species. Rather, it proposes that human-Neanderthal relations included the full spectrum of intergroup interactions we observe in human societies, from warfare and competition to trade and alliance. The ultimate disappearance of Neanderthals in this view resulted from a combination of factors: competitive pressure from modern humans, episodes of direct conflict, climate change, and gradually increasing genetic and cultural absorption into expanding human populations. What makes the complex interaction model most compelling is its alignment with what we know about human behavior generally. Our species has never exhibited a single pattern of interaction with other groups, but has always displayed behavioral flexibility. Throughout history, human groups have alternated between conflict and cooperation with their neighbors, often maintaining trade relations even while engaging in occasional warfare. The complex interaction model suggests similar dynamics characterized our relationship with Neanderthals. This theory also best explains the apparent contradictions in the archaeological record, the evidence of both violence and cultural exchange, of replacement and absorption. These aren't contradictions at all when viewed through the lens of complex variable interactions. Chapter 9. New Science and Emergent Paradoxes. Recent scientific advances have transformed our understanding of human-Neanderthal relations, resolving some questions while introducing new paradoxes. Paleogenetics, in particular, has revolutionized our ability to reconstruct the past through ancient DNA analysis. One of the most surprising discoveries comes from genetic studies of late Neanderthal populations. These analyses reveal that, contrary to traditional views, gene flow wasn't unidirectional from Neanderthals to humans. It also occurred in the reverse direction. Several late Neanderthal specimens show evidence of modern human DNA, indicating that interbreeding went both ways. This challenges models that portray Neanderthals as merely absorbed or replaced by expanding human populations. Instead, it suggests a more complex demographic scenario where both populations influenced each other genetically, consistent with the complex interaction model rather than simple replacement or elimination. Even more surprising is what these genetic studies reveal about the timing of interbreeding events. Rather than a single period of interaction, multiple episodes of genetic exchange occurred over tens of thousands of years. The earliest evidence of interbreeding dates to approximately 100,000 years ago, long before the major expansion of modern humans out of Africa. This suggests early, limited contact between the species, perhaps in the Middle East, where their territories first overlapped. Later episodes occurred around 55,000 years ago, and again around 40,000 years ago, coinciding with major waves of modern human expansion into Eurasia. This pattern suggests recurring contact rather than a single period of interaction and replacement. These findings create a paradox. If humans and Neanderthals maintained contact over such an extended period, why did Neanderthals eventually disappear? Why didn't the two populations simply merge into a hybrid species? The answer may lie in the patterns of genetic selection. Detailed analysis of which Neanderthal genes persisted in human populations and which were selected against reveals a fascinating pattern. Genes related to the immune system, skin and hair characteristics, and fat metabolism were often retained. By contrast, Neanderthal genes related to male fertility were systematically selected against. This suggests that while interbreeding did occur, hybrid males may have had reduced fertility, creating a partial reproductive barrier between the species. Speaking of genetics, if you've had your DNA tested, did you discover any Neanderthal ancestry? I'm curious how many of you have explored your connection to our evolutionary cousins. Drop a comment below if you have. Another new scientific approach comes from paleoproteomics, the analysis of ancient proteins preserved in fossils. This technique can identify species from tiny bone fragments too small for traditional morphological analysis. Applied to ambiguous specimens from the period of potential human-Neanderthal overlap, paleoproteomics has revealed surprising results. Some specimens previously identified as modern human based on archaeological context have proven to be Neanderthal and vice versa. This suggests the two species occasionally use the same sites, either simultaneously or in alternation. It complicates our understanding of which technologies belonged to which species and indicates more cultural overlap than previously recognized. New dating methods have also transformed our understanding of the timeline of interaction. Using improved radiocarbon techniques and novel methods like thermoluminescence dating, archaeologists have established a more precise chronology of human expansion and Neanderthal disappearance. These refined dates reveal that the period of potential overlap between the species was longer than previously thought, up to 10,000 years in some regions. This extended coexistence challenges models of rapid replacement through competition or conflict. It also reveals regional variation in the timing of Neanderthal disappearance. They persisted in some areas, particularly in Western Europe, long after disappearing from Eastern Europe and the Middle East. This pattern suggests that whatever drove Neanderthal extinction wasn't a single catastrophic event, but a process that played out differently across regions, again supporting the complex interaction model over simpler explanations. Perhaps the most profound new evidence comes from advances in analyzing ancient climatic conditions. High-resolution climate data derived from ice cores, cave formations, and marine sediments now allows us to reconstruct prehistoric environments with unprecedented precision. These reconstructions reveal that the period of Neanderthal disappearance coincided with dramatic climate instability. Multiple rapid warming and cooling events created environmental conditions that fluctuated more quickly than at almost any other time in the past 200,000 years. This extreme climate variability would have stressed both human and Neanderthal populations. Resources would have become unpredictable, territories would have shifted, and adaptation would have required considerable flexibility. Modern humans, with their wider social networks and more diverse subsistence strategies, may have been better equipped to weather this climatic instability. Neanderthals, adapted to stable cold conditions, may have struggled with rapid environmental changes. This creates another paradox. If climate played such a crucial role in Neanderthal disappearance, can we still attribute their extinction to interaction with modern humans? The answer is likely both. Climate change and human presence may have worked synergistically. Neanderthals had survived previous climate shifts, including several glacial-interglacial transitions. What made this particular period different was the additional pressure from expanding modern human populations. Similarly, modern humans had encountered and potentially displaced other hominin species in Africa long before meeting Neanderthals. What made this interaction different was the additional stress of extreme climate instability. The combination of these factors, competitive pressure from modern humans and unprecedented climate instability, may have created conditions that neither factor alone would have produced. New archaeological discoveries have added further complexity to this picture. Recent excavations in Spain have uncovered Neanderthal sites dating to just 24,000 years ago, far later than their supposed extinction around 40,000 years ago. If confirmed, these findings would indicate that Neanderthal populations persisted in isolated refugia long after disappearing from most of their former range. This pattern of relict populations is common in species undergoing range contraction and eventual extinction. Even more surprising is evidence that these late Neanderthals were increasingly adopting technologies and behaviors associated with modern humans. Their tools, hunting strategies, and even symbolic practices show clear influence from human cultures. This suggests not simple replacement, but a process of acculturation, Neanderthals adapting to changing conditions by incorporating successful strategies from their human neighbors. It indicates a relationship more complex than mere competition or conflict. Yet these late Neanderthals also show increasing evidence of stress and hardship. Their skeletal remains indicate periods of severe malnutrition. Their teeth show developmental disruptions consistent with periods of extreme resource scarcity. This creates yet another paradox. These late Neanderthals were simultaneously becoming more human-like in their culture, while experiencing increasing biological stress. They were adapting culturally, but struggling biologically. The most profound paradox of all emerges from studies of cognitive and behavioral overlap between the species. Recent research suggests Neanderthals had cognitive capabilities much closer to modern humans than previously recognized. Evidence indicates they created symbolic art, used complex language, performed ritualized burials, and maintained cultural traditions across generations. The cognitive gap between our species appears to have been minimal. This raises a fundamental question. If Neanderthals were so similar to us cognitively, why did they disappear while we survived? What subtle advantage did modern humans possess that proved decisive in this prehistoric competition? Some researchers suggest the difference wasn't individual intelligence, but social structure. Modern humans appear to have maintained larger, more connected social networks than Neanderthals. Evidence for this comes from the movement of exotic materials across vast distances in human sites, indicating trade networks spanning hundreds of kilometers. Neanderthal sites, by contrast, rarely contain materials sourced from more than 20-30 kilometers away. This suggests smaller, more isolated social groups with fewer long-distance connections. This difference in social structure may have provided crucial resilience during periods of environmental stress. When local resources failed, modern humans could potentially draw on alliance networks spanning large territories, while Neanderthals may have had fewer options. These new scientific insights create a picture far more complex than traditional narratives of human superiority and Neanderthal primitiveness. They reveal two sophisticated species with different but overlapping adaptations whose fate was determined by subtle differences and historical contingency. Donsiu Chapter 10, The Complex Truth of Our Shared Past. As we've examined the evidence for human-Neanderthal interactions, the bones bearing signs of violence, the patterns of replacement, the genetic legacy, and the cultural exchange, a more nuanced picture has emerged than either simple competition or systematic violence. The truth, it seems, is both more complex and more profound. The relationship between modern humans and Neanderthals wasn't characterized by a single pattern of interaction, but by a diverse mosaic of behaviors that varied across time, space, and circumstance. In some regions and periods, violence and competition likely predominated. The traumatic injuries on Neanderthal remains from sites like Shanidar Cave provide compelling evidence of direct conflict between the species. The pattern of rapid Neanderthal disappearance following modern human arrival in certain regions also suggests active displacement rather than gradual replacement. The technological advantages of modern humans, particularly their sophisticated projectile weapons, would have given them a significant edge in any violent confrontation. Yet in other contexts, the evidence points toward cooperation and cultural exchange. The adoption of Neanderthal technologies by early modern humans in Europe and the later adoption of human technologies by late Neanderthals indicates periods of observation, learning, and potential direct interaction. The genetic evidence confirms that peaceful interactions occurred with sufficient frequency for interbreeding to take place multiple times across tens of thousands of years. While the overall genetic contribution is limited, it proves that violence wasn't the only form of interaction. What emerges is not a simple story of conquest or replacement, but a complex millennia-long relationship between two intelligent species navigating the challenges of shared territories, climate change, and resource competition. In this more nuanced understanding, Neanderthal disappearance wasn't caused by a single factor, neither climate change alone nor human competition or aggression alone, but by the interaction of multiple pressures that varied across regions and time periods. In some areas, direct competition with modern humans may have been decisive. In others, climate change may have stressed Neanderthal populations to the breaking point. In still others, gradual absorption through interbreeding may have erased the boundaries between the species. Most likely, all these factors interacted in complex ways that varied by region. Competitive pressure from modern humans may have forced Neanderthals into marginal territories, making them more vulnerable to climate fluctuations. Climate stress may have reduced Neanderthal population density, making them more vulnerable to territorial encroachment by modern humans. Reduced numbers may have increased the frequency of interbreeding due to limited mate availability within their own species. This complex multi-causal understanding aligns with what we know about extinction processes generally. Species rarely disappear due to a single factor, but through the interaction of multiple pressures that create synergistic effects. It also aligns with what we know about human behavior throughout history. Our species has never exhibited a single pattern of interaction with other groups, but has always displayed remarkable behavioral flexibility, capable of both extreme violence and extraordinary cooperation. This flexibility appears to have deep evolutionary roots. The evidence suggests that even our earliest ancestors exhibited complex social behaviors that included both intergroup conflict and alliance formation. Perhaps the most profound insight from this investigation is that Neanderthals didn't simply go extinct, at least not completely. Through interbreeding, significant aspects of their genetic heritage persist in modern human populations outside of Africa. Up to 70% of the entire Neanderthal genome can be reconstructed from segments preserved in different modern human populations. While individual non-African humans carry only 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA, collectively we have preserved much of their genetic legacy. Some of these genetic contributions have proven highly advantageous. Neanderthal immune system genes, for instance, helped our ancestors adapt to new pathogens as they expanded into Eurasian environments. Neanderthal genes influencing skin and hair characteristics provided adaptations to different UV radiation levels at northern latitudes. These beneficial adaptations were strongly selected for and remain common in affected populations today. In this sense, Neanderthals didn't simply lose the evolutionary contest with modern humans. Through interbreeding, significant aspects of their adaptive toolkit merged with our own, a form of genetic exchange that benefited our species. This perspective transforms how we should understand our relationship with Neanderthals. Rather than conquerors who eliminated a competitor, we might better see ourselves as the inheritors of a merged legacy, carrying forward advantageous elements of both lineages. The anthropologist Brian Fagan expressed this beautifully when he wrote, "We did not simply replace the Neanderthals. In some sense, we became them." This genetic and potentially cultural inheritance represents a profound connection to our evolutionary cousins. This more complex understanding has significant implications for how we think about human uniqueness and our relationship with other species. If violence toward Neanderthals was only part of a more complex relationship that included cooperation and genetic exchange, it suggests greater flexibility in our species' behavioral repertoire. It indicates that aggressive territoriality, while certainly part of our potential range of behaviors, doesn't represent an inescapable destiny. Our capacity for cooperation, alliance, and even merger with different groups may be equally fundamental to our nature. The evidence of cultural exchange between humans and Neanderthals further supports this view. The adoption of technologies and practices across species boundaries suggests a level of openness to innovation regardless of its source. A pragmatic adaptability rather than rigid xenophobia. This behavioral flexibility may have been our species' greatest adaptive advantage. Rather than superior intelligence or technology alone, our ability to shift between different social strategies, from conflict to cooperation, competition to alliance, may have proven decisive in our evolutionary success. Such flexibility would have been particularly advantageous during the period of dramatic climate fluctuation, when modern humans and Neanderthals overlapped. The ability to adjust social strategies and alliance networks in response to changing conditions would have provided crucial resilience. From this perspective, what distinguished modern humans from Neanderthals may not have been greater intelligence or inherent aggression, but a more fluid social structure that could expand and contract, include or exclude as circumstances demanded. This understanding offers a more balanced view of our evolutionary history. Neither the triumphalist narrative of superior humans replacing primitive Neanderthals, nor the revisionist view of humans as simply genocidal invaders. Instead, it suggests a complex process of interaction, competition, conflict, and merger that played out differently across regions and time periods, ultimately resulting in the incorporation of Neanderthal genetic and potentially cultural elements into expanding modern human populations. The question of whether we fought our evolutionary cousins thus has no simple answer. In some contexts, we certainly did. The evidence of traumatic injuries and patterns of replacement cannot be dismissed. Yet in other contexts, we clearly cooperated, exchanged knowledge, and interbred. The genetic legacy and evidence of cultural transmission prove that violence wasn't the only form of interaction between our species. What emerges from this investigation isn't a single narrative of human-Neanderthal relations, but a complex mosaic of interactions that included the full spectrum of intergroup behaviors, from warfare and competition to alliance and merger. This complexity shouldn't be seen as a failure to reach a definitive conclusion, but as a more accurate reflection of human behavioral flexibility. Our species has never been defined by a single pattern of interaction with others, but by our capacity to employ diverse social strategies as circumstances demand. Imagine for a moment the last Neanderthals, not as a separate species fighting for survival against human invaders, but as increasingly integrated members of mixed communities, groups where the boundaries between human and Neanderthal had begun to blur through generations of interaction. Perhaps they no longer identified primarily as Neanderthals, but as members of specific bands or tribes, groups defined more by cultural affiliation than biological descent. Their distinctive physical features, gradually diluted through interbreeding, may have become simply variations within these mixed communities. In this view, Neanderthals didn't so much go extinct as merge, their genetic and cultural heritage incorporated into the expanding human population. They disappeared not through elimination but through absorption. The evidence increasingly supports at least partial aspects of this scenario. Late Neanderthal sites show increasing adoption of technologies associated with modern humans. Genetic studies confirm multiple episodes of interbreeding across thousands of years. The story of human evolution thus becomes not the triumph of one species over others, but the gradual merger of diverse human lineages, a prehistoric melting pot that eventually produced our present-day diversity. This perspective has profound implications for how we understand ourselves. If significant aspects of our genetic and potentially cultural heritage derive from Neanderthals and perhaps other hominin species, our identity is more complex and layered than we've traditionally recognized. We are not simply Homo sapiens, but a composite species carrying forward the legacy of multiple human lineages. Our success may lie not in our superiority over other human species, but in our ability to incorporate their strengths into our own adaptive toolkit. Perhaps this is the most important lesson from our investigation into human-Neanderthal relations. That openness to difference, flexibility in social strategies, and the ability to incorporate beneficial elements from others may be our species' greatest strengths. If you've enjoyed this exploration of our shared past with Neanderthals, Consider subscribing to our channel for more journeys into the mysteries of human origins, where we continue to unravel the complex story of what it truly means to be human.